Hey guys, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? All right, well, it's 8:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. And this is my talk on Technical Leadership 101. I'm John Rauda, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about my experiences through management and leadership, the things that I've learned, the failures that I've made, the mistakes that I've made, and hopefully you'll get something cool out of this that you can take to your team and understand that leadership is not about a title. It's not about direct reports. It's really just about being there for other people and leading either to the left or to the right. You can also lead up and down, and I love it when people that report to me lead up because I need it and it's helpful. So we're going to talk about that. One cool thing when I got to CodeMash, this is my first CodeMash, and it's been awesome so far. I'm completely blown away by how cool this is and how organized it is and how great it is. But I was sitting in my hotel room when I first got here, and I'm a little bit of a nerd, so I had my iPad and I was watching Disney Plus, and I was streaming the Star Wars Clone Wars, the cartoons, because I was catching up with what my son was watching. And it just happened to be that it showed up, this thing was like the text in front of the episode, and it said, "Great leaders inspire greatness in others." And I thought, wow, what a coincidence that I'm getting ready to give a talk about leadership, and this pops up there. I tried to screenshot it, but Disney Plus has that thing where you can't screenshot on the iPad. It just shows up black. So I had to take a picture of it, and you can kind of see me in the background reflecting in my little blue armband. So I was sitting in my hotel room taking that picture, and I thought that was really cool. Before I get really started and get into the talk, I want to talk about why I'm giving this talk. And one of the important leaders that I follow is Simon Sinek, and he wrote a book called Start With Why. And he says that one of the things you should do is talk about why you're doing whatever you're doing. And there's several reasons why I got into leadership. One of the big reasons is because I was terrible at it. I became a manager because that's kind of what they do. They promote people that are pretty good developers to manage people that do development. And I wasn't very good at the management part, so I started losing people, and I had a lot of turnover, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. So I wanted to get better at it, so it was easier on me and easier on my family. I didn't have to work as much. And what I found out is that it's actually exciting. You get to build people instead of just building code and building projects. And then the second reason, which probably should be my first reason, is I have 3 kids. And I love my kids to death, and one of the reasons why I want great leaders out there is because someday they're going to have a job. At least they better have a job. And when they get that job, hopefully it's in tech, and they will hopefully have a good leader. They'll have a good boss. Because I've had some pretty crappy bosses, and I had some awesome bosses. And the difference that it makes on your life with stress for having a good boss and a bad boss is a big deal. And I want them to have that good boss experience. And whoever I can reach and talk to about leadership, maybe they will be my kid's boss someday, or maybe not. Maybe they'll influence someone else that will influence someone else that will influence someone else that will be my kid's boss someday. And that's what I want to do. So I want to reach as many people as I can and talk about leadership so that these kids have that good experience someday in the future. And hopefully all the kids at CodeMash will have the same thing going forward. Now, this talk is not about getting promotion. It's not about making more money. It's not about getting a raise. It's not about management, but it is about leadership. It's about building a good leader. It's about building culture. It's about team building, because all that's important when it comes to leadership. You can't be a leader of nobody. You have to be a leader of a team or people, right? You can't lead a company, you can only lead people. So we're going to talk about people, and that's what this is about. Now, I want to talk a little bit about my history in technology. I've been all over the place. I started out as a help desk person, and then I became a database administrator for a few years. Then I co-founded a startup doing web development, and did that for 7 years and sold it. Then got into systems administration somehow, and SharePoint, and then web development. And then I became a manager of a web and mobile team, and that's where my leadership journey started. And at that company, I never got any formal training. It was just, hey, you're now the manager. These people report to you. Oh, you need to do performance reviews. You need to do all these things that I didn't know how to do. And what I found myself doing is just trying to step in and get the projects done. I didn't really care about the people on my team. I didn't care about what they were doing. I just wanted to make sure that the projects got done one way or another. And in doing that, I became kind of an absent leader. I became the guy that wasn't there as a boss, and I wasn't there for my people. I was kind of a jerk during code reviews, and what that led to was 2 years of having the highest turnover rate in our company. And at one point, for about a 2-year period, 30% of my headcount was absent because there were empty seats that I was trying to fill. And when people talk about hitting rock bottom, in my career, when I hit rock bottom was the day I had 2 people quit on the same day. And that left me at 50% of staff, and that was it. And I didn't know what to do, and I was really lucky because our company had just issued, I've been a manager for about 1.5 years at this point, and our company had just had leadership training that they just started, and they put me in it probably because of the turnover. It's probably required to be there. And all the executive vice presidents came out and they gave little talks and they said, hey, if anybody needs a mentor, reach out to me, I'll be your mentor. So me being naive and thinking that maybe I could convince some of these executives to take me under their wings and teach me some things, and maybe it'll get me good in the company and get me a promotion or something like that, I emailed all of them, every single one of them, and said, hey, will you be my mentor? And the responses I got back were kind of shocking. One guy wrote back and said, I'm only an EVP because my brother's the CEO and I don't have any interest in mentoring. Another guy replied back and said, no, I'm going to retire in a couple years and I don't have any desire to take on any new people. HR just made me say that. And then the executive vice president of HR did not even reply. So it was kind of disappointing, but I did get one reply out of the 7 people I emailed. And the one guy was a vice president of sales, and he said, yeah, I don't know anything about technology, and I don't know anything about leadership, but I'd love to talk to you. We can learn this together. And so we started meeting, and when I had those 2 people quit, I called him up, and I said, so a couple people quit, and I don't know what to do. He's like, well, why did they quit? I said, well, because Charlotte pays, more. We were just south of Charlotte and out in the outskirts, and we don't pay as much as the banks in Charlotte, so they quit to go work at a bank and make more money. And he said, nah, I don't think that's it. I said, well, what do you think? Why do you think they quit? He's like, well, they quit because you're a bad boss. And people don't quit their companies, they quit their bosses. So you need to fix what you're doing, and don't worry about that. And that really hurt, because I was expecting him to say, oh, you're doing fine, we'll work through this together, we'll get through it. But that's not what he said. He said, it's your fault. You need to look inward for once, instead of pointing the fingers everywhere else. So that started my journey of reading as many books as I could and picking up TED Talks and watching as many things as I could. And I found that there's so much out there on leadership. There's so much out there that's interesting and fascinating. And my little science brain started seeing that there was actually some scientific correlations with the biology of a human and the need for good leaders in social environments. So I picked up a book by Simon Sinek called Leaders Eat Last. Anybody read that book? Okay, a couple. In that book, he talks about some brain chemicals. And I want to talk about the biology of leadership that he talks about and kind of how these chemicals have helped humans over time to be better leaders and some of the needs that we had. Because he mentions that leadership is about being there for your people and trusting people and making people happy. And these are the happy chemicals. And you've probably seen these in some other talks. And there was a talk where somebody talked about oxytocin and serotonin as being important for happiness. But I want to go through these real quick, and then we'll get into more physical things you can do with your team for leadership. But endorphins. Endorphins is the chemical in your brain that's there to mask pain, to mask physical pain. So anybody run here or exercise? Yeah, a couple people. Well, if you ever run, you heard of runner's high. Runner's high is the endorphins. You can go out and go for a long run, get some endorphins, and while you're running, you actually feel good. And when you finish running, you actually feel great. And you feel great because of 2 reasons. One, you have the endorphins, which means that it's masking that physical pain, making you feel good. And you also get some dopamine. And dopamine is the chemical that comes out whenever you achieve something. You mark something off your to-do list. So when you finish running, you get both of those. But they're short-lived, and they kind of expire. And then an hour later, your legs are sore, your ankles hurt, your joints hurt, and you're like, why did I do that? And you kind of feel bad again. At least that's the way it is when I run. But if you do it a lot, then you get used to it and you get excited about the fact that you're going to run, and the dopamine keeps kicking in. The problem with those 2 chemicals is, or one advantage of those 2 chemicals, you don't need anybody else to get them. You can go out and go for a run. You can check things off your to-do list. You can get stuff done and get some endorphins and dopamine and be good, right? But dopamine is highly addictive. It's one of those things that the more you check things off your to-do list, the more you want to check things off your to-do list. And I know for me, I will put things on my little reminders app on my phone that I've already done just so I can check them off, and get that feel good that I did something, right? Dopamine is also released whenever you take drugs. It's released during gambling. And if you know anybody that's had an addiction with any of those things, it's really difficult to break. It's difficult to get out of that. And dopamine is highly addictive. But luckily, we have these other 2 chemicals in our brain, oxytocin and serotonin. And oxytocin is that chemical they call it the love chemical. It's the butterflies and rainbows and unicorns and all the fuzzy, fancy, nice things that happen. But it is released whenever you have physical contact or you spend time and effort to do something for someone else. It's not released for giving money or donating money. It's released for time and effort. Time is one of those things you can never get back, so once you've spent your time, it's gone. I'm sure some of you people are wondering why you're here, wasting your time in this talk, but if so, I'm sorry. But once you've used your time, you can't get it back. We all have an equal amount of time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Nobody's got more, nobody's got less. So if I tell you that I'm going to spend time with someone and somebody sees that I'm spending that extra effort and time with them, it's going to mean more than if I just have a form email that I send to everybody that's very generic. So if you think about it, if you ever get a survey, the survey says, we value your input in this company. You're a valuable employee. We want to see what we can do to help out. Candidly respond to this with your things. It means nothing. It's just a simple survey. But if I went and said those exact same words in a one-on-one conversation with somebody on my team, it means something because we're there together and we're using time and effort and energy. And that's going to release a little bit of oxytocin. The cool thing about oxytocin is it's actually an addiction inhibitor. So it will reduce the effects of addiction. And if you look at the 12-step program for Alcoholics Anonymous, step 12 is to help someone else. It's service. And one of the advantages of that is it releases oxytocin, which inhibits the addictive behaviors of dopamine. So doing things for others is helpful in our survival. It also makes us happier. It makes others around us happier. So that's oxytocin. So one of you go back to the history of these three chemicals, we'll get into the fourth one in just a second, is they all had something to do with the development of the human species. So as we're developing, let's go back to like the caveman days or the hunter-gatherer days of society. We needed endorphins in order to go after animals because we're not the strongest, we're not the fastest, but we have endurance, and if something can mask some of the pain whenever we're running or chasing or hunting or gathering to get that stuff done, then we can continue through and we can get food for the next day. And we needed dopamine because if we waited until we were actually hungry and physically hungry to go out and try to achieve something and try to gather that stuff and knock something off our to-do list or hunt, it'd probably be too late. We'd probably starve to death. I don't know if anybody here is a hunter. I'm not, but I've got some cousins that are, and almost every time I ask them, hey, you went hunting, they went on a hunting trip, how did you do? We didn't catch anything. We didn't get anything. Because sometimes it takes a while. And if you waited until you were starving to go out for that hunt, you might not get any food, So we needed dopamine in order to have that sense of achievement so we would go for things even if we didn't need it yet. And then oxytocin gives us that sense of community so that we can gather together because not everybody's strong. We're all built differently. We're not equal, honestly. People say everybody's equal. We're not equal. We're different. I'm not a very technical person anymore because I've gotten out of it. I've gotten weaker at that. I'm terrible at design. I can't draw anything. I can't dance. I'm not good at certain things. Other people are really good at certain things, and they're different. We're good at different things. I can't fight, but some MMA fighters, if you're built like an MMA fighter, just different body set, different mindset. But we need a community. We need people that can do everything so we could all live together and develop as a society. And then that's where serotonin comes in. Serotonin is what we call the status chemical. So as you achieve something and you're prideful about it, it increases your status. It increases the amount of serotonin in your body. And the more serotonin that you have in your body, the more confidence that you have. And, we have this hierarchical society where we have alphas and people that aren't, that are a little bit lower. And that changes in every environment. And it's all dependent upon your environment. Like, for example, when I'm talking about leadership, I kind of feel like I'm an alpha because I learned so much about it. I'm still learning so much about it, but I'm very excited about it, and I'm going to talk more. I'm going to be more open about it. But if you got me in a conversation about something different that I'm not that skilled about, I'm not really know a lot, then I'm not the alpha. I'll step down, and I'll let someone else take that lead, and they'll be the alpha in that situation. It's all about environment. And the same thing is true when it comes to the hunter-gatherer societies. So let's say that the hunters went out and they got some food and they brought it in. Well, if we all ran in together, we're going to get some fights trying to get the food, right? And if you're built like the MMA guy I mentioned before, you'll probably punch me in the face and get the food because I'm not really a fighter. And then I'll be mad, and at the end of the night, if a saber-toothed tiger comes in and we're all sleeping, I'm not waking up that guy. I'm going to let him get eaten, and we're done, So it's not a good system. It's not good for society. But if we know that there is a hierarchy there, and we allow that alpha to take the food first, let his confidence grow because he is the alpha, when danger comes, they will protect us. And that's what a leader's supposed to do, is to protect their team and to be there for their team and to grow their team. And when you look at this and how humans developed and we have these 4 chemicals throughout our body, and science shows this, it really changes my mindset anyway for what a leader's supposed to do and how they're going to do it. Now, there is one more chemical. It's not a happy chemical, but it's a chemical I want to talk about, and it's called cortisol. How many people know what cortisol is? It's the stress chemical, right? People hear about that. It's actually a really good thing. It's good that cortisol exists. Otherwise, we would probably have gone extinct years ago. Because we've all seen like the herds of gazelles that are out there, and they have cortisol too, and they're grazing, and all of a sudden one of them hears something, it's like, and then they all go, and they all freak out, And one of the ones that maybe didn't hear the first noise, but they just heard everybody else freak out, sees the lion, they all run away, and they're all saved another day, right? It's great. And cortisol is the start of fight or flight, right? And if you're like me, it's going to be a flight for sure. But when you get that cortisol, it's supposed to be in your system and out of your system. And when you get cortisol, it heightens your senses. It makes you more aware of what's going on around you. Your heart rate's going to speed up. Your reaction time's going to be a little bit better. But that energy has to come from somewhere. And it comes from your immune system. It comes from your growth hormones. All that stuff reduces when your cortisol level goes up, which is not good for people that work in situations where their leaders put more stress on them than is necessary. Because when that stress comes on you and you're fearful of your job, you're going to have more cortisol in your system. You're going to have that drip of cortisol that's not going to just be in and out. It's going to be there all the time. And that's going to make our immune systems a little weaker. And it's going to make our people get less healthy. And it's not good. It's not good for all of society. So as a leader, it's our responsibility to find ways to reduce the stress of our people and make our people feel safe within our company, one way or another. And that's by not bad-mouthing our people and not going behind them. Let them know that they have the ability to learn and to move forward, and that they shouldn't be fearful about the things that they're doing. All right, so with all that being said, let's get into building a leader. So I want to talk about building a leader, and building is one of the things that I think is fun. I enjoy doing construction projects around the house. I'm not great at it, but I like to do it. It's a hands-on thing. And I want to equate building a house to building like a leader and building a team. In building a house, you go through like 4 simple steps, right? You're going to lay a foundation. Got to have the foundation on first before you put walls up. You can't put walls up and then try to put a foundation underneath it afterwards. It doesn't work that way. So you put the foundation first, and then you do the exterior, because you got the exterior walls before you put the interior. Because I don't know if you've ever tried to put like drywall down before you cover the roof. It's going to get rained on and ruined, so you can't do that. So you do the exterior, and then you do the interior, and then after the interior is done, then you do your refinements, which is kind of like the cabinets, the trim, the flooring that goes on after the fact, and the paint, all that good stuff. That works great for a house, but that's not necessarily how we build a leader or build a team. If you're going to build a team or a leader, you've got to reverse that a little bit and do what I call FIRE. I use the acronym FIRE because it's something you can remember, and hopefully you'll take away with it. I remember what these things are, the order that I need to use to build a team, to build a leader, and that's foundation. So you do the foundation first. We'll talk about what these things are in just a minute. And then you work on your interior, because you got to get right inside before you can get right outside. You got to fix yourself inside and take care of your person before you can take care of the team. And then you do your refinements, your extra things that we're going to talk about, the little things that you can do that you guys can leave with today, practical steps that you can do to be a better leader. And then we'll talk about what happens on the exterior when those things are all taken care of. So let's move into the foundation first. For starters, when I first gave my first leadership talk like 5 or 6 years ago, which is totally different than this talk today, I asked my daughter, who at the time, I think she was 5 or 6, I said, so what's a leader? And she goes, well, that's the person in the front of the line. And I thought, well, okay, that's what you get from a 5-year-old when you ask him what a leader is. And then I thought about it. It's like, you know what? She's absolutely right. A leader is the person that goes first, and they're the ones that show the way. And if you are going first, you've got to pull those behind you. Leaders can't be in the back pushing forward. You ever try to push a rope with a weight at the end? What happens when you push a rope? It kind of curls up. It doesn't really, it's worthless. But if you get in front of it and you pull, then you can move things forward. Then you can get people going. Then you can get momentum in what you're working on. So what I did is I wanted to figure out myself and fix myself as a leader before I could fix my team. So I created a code. And this code is I call it a code. It's not like typing code or anything like that. It's just our cultural norms. It's the things that I'm going to do, and I want to publicly put this out in front of my team and tell my team this is how I'm going to respond to things. And then after a while, I wanted to hold them accountable to respond in the same way. So we develop cultural norms. We develop actions in the way that we're going to represent ourselves as a team. And I'll talk about what happened before and what happened after we did all this stuff when I get to the end. But I want to go through my code really quick just so you guys can have a framework that you can use, and you can steal all this. I don't have anything copyrighted or trademarked, so take it all. But my code that I created for my department, and these things evolve over time. So we'll have a code, and every quarter I meet with my team. We go through it. I read them all again. They probably get bored with it. But then we talk about it. We have like a retrospective of the quarter. What are we doing well on this code? What can we add to this code? And this first one that I'm going to mention is one that my team added this past, I guess it was back in June. We added this one, and it's called Act Like an Owner. So as a team, we're going to act like an owner. We're going to act like we own this company. We're not going to act like we're just an employee, number 4567321. We want to be an actual owner of this company. And we're going to answer every decision and every question that comes up as if we own the company to do what's best for that interest of the company, which will then trickle down and be best for us. Next, we have each other's back. We're never going to talk about anybody bad outside of our department. Now, inside the department, we'll joke with each other. We'll talk trash. We'll We'll tell somebody they're not doing a good job. But outside, we win as a team, we lose as a team. If something's wrong, it's our fault. It's never an individual's fault. And we always have each other's back outside of our department. We choose people over process. This is a Scrum principle that I'm sure people have heard about. But the way that I describe this to my team is everybody's a person. Everybody has stuff going on outside of work. And we have policies, we have procedures, we have processes, we have expectations of performance. But understand that people go through things. People have problems, and maybe their dog died, and they're going to come into work, and they're not going to be as productive for that week or whatever. And you got to understand that, and you've got to be with people. And it's important to talk about those things and to talk about what's going on outside of work so that when you're in work and you do have something coming on, people can understand you, and they can have empathy for you, and they can respect each other. So we choose empathy, we choose people over process all the time. Next up is we question our assumptions. We can't just assume that things are done right and we're going to stick with them. We're going to question everything. And the reason why we question everything is because we don't ever want to get in that situation where we do things the way it's always been done because that's the way it's always been done. One of the things I absolutely hate is when I ask somebody, well, why do we do this? And they don't know. They don't know, well, then why are you doing it? So we want to question all of our assumptions before we move forward. We think big, but we start small. Every big goal has a small starting point. About 8 or 9 years ago, I ran my first marathon. And I had not ran really before then, so I told somebody I was going to do it, and they all told me I couldn't do it because I haven't ran before. And honestly, the hardest part was putting my shoes on in the morning to go for that run. Once I got out there, it wasn't hard. I'm going to finish it. I'm going to go through with it. But it was just getting started every day. Starting is always the hardest part. But if you start small, if you set yourself up for success for me, it was putting my clothes and shoes out at night before I went to bed because that was easy to do. When I woke up, they're already there. I'm like, well, I guess I got to do this. And putting them on and going. So think big, but start small. Next up, as a team, we're not going to create waves. We're not going to start rumors. We're not going to spread rumors. We're not going to continue things. We're just going to ride them. We're going to ride above it. When people start, we're going to take the high road all the times. Next up, we're intentional about our work. Everything we do, let's reanalyze why we do it. Let's figure out the importance of it, and let's be intentional about it. This one that came out of probably about 8 years ago, I had listened to a time management talk to try to figure out how to be better with my time, and someone mentioned be intentional about your work, that you can save a lot of time. So what I did is I actually went through my calendar. And anybody here managers or team leads or something, you guys have meetings that you have to go to, like reoccurring, pointless meetings? Sometimes they seem pointless. Well, what I did is I evaluated all those meetings most of them were on my calendar when I got promoted into the position because a person before me had those reoccurring meetings. So I sent a nice, polite email to all the organizers and just said, this meeting is obviously important to the company because we have it. I'm not really getting any value out of it at this time. If there's anything that I can do to offer input to improve the meeting, I would be glad to. Or if I'm not necessary to be there, I'd like to be removed from the list. And if you need me to send someone else in my place, I can. But please let me know or send me minutes for the meeting afterwards. And 70% of those responded back and said, no, you don't need to be here. You're good. And that freed up several hours a week of time because I was intentional about the things that we were doing and not just doing it because we always did it. Next, we fail fast, recover faster. This is kind of a lot of people think about this when they talk about deployment of code and things like that, but I wanted to take this to the next step. And anything we want to do, we want to try out, let's use analytics behind it and let's have a rollback plan. So for example, I had one team that decided to switch from Scrum to Kanban. And I said, okay, well, how do we get back to Scrum if Kanban doesn't work? Let's plan this out. Let's figure out the process. Let's do what our metrics going to be that we're going to follow to see if this is working better for this team or not, and how do we roll back if we need to. So we always try to think about that. How can we recover faster than we fail? And this is my favorite. We are not experts. We will keep the posture of a student always learning. Whenever someone thinks that they're an expert or thinks that they know it all, that's when their ego gets too big and they start to really fall behind. I want my whole team to always think like a student, always try to learn, and always try to move ahead and realize that there's so much more than they don't know. There's levels to this. There's levels to everything. There are people that are experts at certain fields, but then there's people that are far greater than them in that same field somewhere else. There's levels to everything. Let's continue to keep that posture of a student. Go into places like this where you meet some awesome people that can kind of show you that there are levels to that, and it's been great to see that. So always keep that posture of a student learning. Next, we make the complex seem simple. One of the biggest things that changed our perception from the outside of the company into the technology department was the way we communicated. Once we stopped talking in acronyms and stopped trying to make things seem harder than they were and just started talking about talking in ways that the business can understand, using simple words. What I told my team is everything you say back to the business, pretend like you're saying it to a 5-year-old. And talk, and not to talk down to them, but to explain it in a way that your 5-year-old would understand. And it's not because they don't understand, it's because the simpler we make things seem, the more confidence people have in us. Whenever we say, oh, this is really hard, then they have less confidence in your team. They have less confidence that you can actually do the job. But if you make things seem simple, people will have more confidence in you. And then the reverse happens. You begin to have more confidence in yourself. And you begin to achieve things that you didn't think you could do as easily. Next, make life easier for those around us. Some people will say you got to meet everybody in the middle, right? You got to give 50%, and they give 50%, and you meet in the middle. Don't. Give 51%. Give 55%. Give a little bit more than everybody else around you. That builds social capital. That helps people see the fact that you're willing to take an extra step. You're willing to go a little bit further to meet them down the road. And then they'll pay that back to you in the long run. And even if they don't, it makes you feel good about doing it. It makes you a better person for doing that. So make life easier for those around you. Give that extra 1 or 2% every time. And once you get in the habit of doing it, it just becomes the way that you operate. And our last one is we're here to serve, not be served. One of the problems that I've seen, and I've had this myself in technology, is that we get to the point where we realize that we build the products that the company's selling sometimes, right? And we feel like, we're here to build those products. We're not here to help Joe Schmo over here, in accounting. But in reality, no, we need to think differently. We need to think that we are here to serve. We have customers internally and externally, and we need to serve those customers and do whatever we can to make things easier for them. And that's the code that I have my team work through, and it evolves all the time. We go through this and we change it, we tweak it, we modify it, and we talk about it. But in reality, this is just laying the foundation of leadership for our team, for myself. It's the operating code that I'm going to use, the operating system that I'm going to use for myself and for my team. So once we get the foundation laid, then we have to get and work on our interior. And how many people flew into CodeMash? Anybody other than me? Yeah, a couple people. So when you're on the plane, you probably heard someone give some instructions about, if there's an accident or an event and you're traveling with a child, put your oxygen mask on first, then help those around you. And the reason why you have to do that is because if you are traveling with a child and you don't put your oxygen mask on first, you work on the child, maybe you don't get theirs on, or maybe you do, but then you start to pass out. Nobody's there to help you. So put yours on first, and then you can work on helping others. The same is true when it comes to, leadership issues and personal issues. Fix yourself first. It's really hard to go fix someone else when you're struggling with the same problems. Worry about how you can fix it, and then tell people that you had these problems, and here's how you work through them yourself, and here's how you're continually working through them, and help people out that way. But if you go to someone and you tell them that they're not doing something right, but you're not doing it either, it's not helpful. It's not helpful at all. But if you fix that first and then go to them and say, hey, here's the problem that I had too when I was struggling with this, and here's how I got past it, and I want to help you move in that same direction, that will help fix them first. So the things I really want to talk about with interior is motivation, because we all have different motivations. We have different things that motivate us. And I read a book by Daniel Pink called Drive. Has anybody read that? That's an awesome book. He talks about what motivates people. And in there, he definitely says that money is a motivator. Absolutely. And if it's not a motivator, then why do we work at all, right? Money is a motivator, but it's not the number one motivator. People typically don't leave jobs for small raises. They leave jobs for big raises. So if you pay people roughly what they're worth, then you can take that off the table and worry about the 3 things that really motivate people, according to Dan Pink, and that's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So when I was working on my team and trying to fix this turnover issue and all the problems we were having, I wanted to look at how I could improve the motivation of my team. What are the 3 things that I need to work on? Well, Dan said it was autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So I looked at autonomy first. I thought that was the easiest. Autonomy is just freedom, right? It's the freedom to do things in certain ways. Well, then I hit some roadblocks because I worked at a traditional company that did not allow us to work remotely. We had certain hours we had to keep, so it had to be 8 to 5 hours. So I couldn't change their hours. I couldn't change where they worked. But I did have the ability to change what they worked on and how they worked. So I gave them the freedom to choose what they worked on. Prior to that, we had certain applications, and certain developers always worked on these applications. We started changing that up. We also gave people a little bit more freedom about what they worked on. And I took something that I heard that Google used to do where they had 20% time, where they said you could spend time to work on whatever you wanted to. So I gave my employees 4 hours a week. I said, 4 hours a week, I want you to work on something that's not your normal projects. Pick something else, nothing that's on our backlog, nothing that we're working on right now, just something that you want to do that you think is interesting, and let's work on that. So this company was an internet service provider, and we did internet and cable TV and all that stuff. And out of that, this is 10 years ago, and we rolled out a couple of products that made huge impacts. And one of them was very simple. The guy said, hey, why don't we just create a pop-up when people log in to pay their bill that if they're not paperless, it says, want to go green? Click yes. And you click yes, and now they're paperless. We did that, and we saved $80,000 a month in paper costs and postage. And that came out of someone just goofing off, not a request that came from our product managers or from the business or marketing or anybody. Just one guy said, hey, this is an idea, let's do it. And by doing that, we had a big achievement. We've had several achievements like that came out of giving people a little bit of freedom to move forward. And also, it made him happy. He actually did something that made an impact. Because a lot of people feel like they're not contributing, and that's why they want to leave somewhere else, because they feel like they're not making a difference, they're not making an impact. And now he had that feeling that he did make an impact, and he could see the numbers that showed it. Next up is mastery. So mastery is just being good at something that's important to you, right? Getting better at something that's important to you. And that was an easy one, too, because we could just offer training. I was lucky to work at a place that had training. But there's so much online training. You guys are all here. You're obviously you're trying to get better at something. That's why you're at CodeMash and learning. So that was kind of an easier one, too, to improve motivation, is just to offer opportunities to train. So you had that 4 hours a week that you could use for another project of some sort. I gave them another 4 hours a week to use for training. Some people took it up. Some people didn't. That's their choice. They had the freedom to choose. Now, I want to talk about one more thing when it comes to motivations. I'll get into purpose later because that one was hard for me because everybody has different perspectives and different purposes and why they're doing things. It was hard, so I'll talk about that one in just a second. But one of the things that I noticed, it was in Dan Pink's book, Drive, was a daycare experiment. Does anybody remember the daycare experiment? So anybody here have kids in daycare? A couple people. So if you have kids in daycare, you have the responsibility to drop your kids off at a certain time and pick them up at a certain time. And anybody like me ever lose track of time and are late to pick up your kids from daycare? A couple people. There's a punishment if you're late for picking up your kids at daycare. It's called shame. Because you have to go there and you have to be the parent that forgot your kids. And usually when you go there, it's really, really interesting. They're not in the room that you left them. Because what they do is they huddle all the kids together like in the cafeteria area. And there's like one or two teachers that are there left over that are just like, hating life because they have to be there when all the other teachers got to go home because you were late. And you have to do that walk of shame while your kid's saying, Daddy, Daddy, why are you so late? And, it's embarrassing. Well, the daycare experiment, what they did at this daycare, and by the way, that's my kid with the striped shirt and Vince. But what they decided to do was to charge a fine to reduce the amount of people being late. They thought, well, if we charge a fine, $10 every 10 minutes, then that will reduce the number of people being late. So they decided to put that out there. Well, what had happened was that it actually worked in reverse. Because now, instead of punishing people by charging a fine, you actually took away the punishment of shame, which is far greater than paying a fine, and you made it a product that they sold. So now I can just pay for you to keep my kids a little bit longer, and the actual rate of kids being left longer doubled. Because now it's okay. Now I'm paying someone. I don't feel guilty anymore because it's a service. So be careful with your motivations and the things you do. Because every now and then you're going to realize that your intended consequence isn't what you're doing. So you got to be careful about that. Now, some other things that I did, practical advice that I can give you guys for your teams to help motivate them, is to have fun with your team. So whenever we do this quarterly going through our code, we also order pizza, and then I bring in a Super Nintendo Classic, a Nintendo Classic, and a Sega Classic, and we play some video games for 3 or 4 hours, and one guy brings in a bunch of board games and card games, and they play. And we have a good time talking. Because I run, all of technology, so we have applications folks, we have developers, we have network security, and sometimes they don't get opportunities to interact in a positive way. Sometimes the network security guy's like, no, 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 and now he gets to say yes and have fun and play games with people, and it changes the environment to have that little bit of interaction that's not no and is actually yes at some point. So it's kind of a fun thing that they get to do on a regular basis and enjoy themselves, and it improves their motivation. And usually a couple weeks after, I'll notice that our velocity will pick up and we'll get more stuff done right after those kind of events, which is really cool. Now, the next one is purpose. I told you I'd talk about this. This was hard for me because at the time when I was working on my team, we were a web and mobile I was manager of a web mobile development team, and we were really working on mostly internal applications for guys that drove trucks around, and they fixed cable modems that were bad. And mostly what we did is built forms and process stuff. And I couldn't figure out a way to make things interesting and exciting for building those forms. So I told myself, I'm going to whatever the next request that comes in from the business, I'm going to focus really hard on coming up with some kind of purpose of why they're asking this and how we can benefit this to use this, purposely for our company. So the request came in, and we had an app that you would get your trouble ticket, you would open it, and you would see all the notes that were in there before, and you would add some notes to it and save it, and then you would close it if you wanted to, if you were ready to close it with the close codes and stuff all at the bottom. Well, the request was to move that close code stuff to the top. I was like, well, that's stupid. How do I get purpose out of that? So I started asking why, and then they would say, well, it's easier. And I was like, well, why? Well, why? And I asked why like 4 or 5 times, and finally they told me, well, the guys don't actually close the tickets when they finish the job. They put their notes in, they save it, and they wait until the end of the day, because if the customer calls back and says, it was working, but now it's not again, then they have to go back and reopen the ticket and redo stuff. It's easier if they just leave the ticket open, and then at the end of the day, they go through all 15 or tickets that they had and close them all at once. I said, well, okay, so they're done with their job, and then they're closing their tickets? And he said, yeah. I said, well, why move it to the top? Why don't we just create like a batch close? You select all and close all of them that you have open at the time, or choose the ones that you want to close and close multiple, and not have to open the ticket and move into it. It's like, oh, that's even better. Let's do that. So then I went to my team and I told them about the request and what we were going to do, and then I was able to tell a story. And stories are great. If you ever want to convey purpose, tell a story. So I told them, I said, we have 120 truck technicians that go out in trucks and they drive around, and they do on average about 15 tickets a day. And they close them all at the end of the day. And right now it's taking them about 10 to 12 minutes to close all those tickets, because they have to scroll, put the close codes, and hit close. And they're doing that when they're finished with their job, right before they go home to see their kids. If we can give them off work 10 minutes early, 5 days a week, we're giving them 50 more minutes every week to spend time with their kids, to spend time with their families, to eat dinner, to go out with their wife, to do something else. So that's an extra hour a week that we're giving these guys back, life outside of work. And when I told my team that, they actually knocked that project out quicker than anything we've done. And it was one of those things that we were able to tell a story about what's really happening in a way that's relatable to people and give a little bit of purpose. Now, a couple other things we did to give purpose, which I think are super interesting, is we worked on this project. This is a fountain park in Rock Hill. Our company had donated this park to the city, and we discovered that they had these jets that you could control through Raspberry Pi. So we set up an interface with them. When you connected to the Wi-Fi on the fountain park, you could open a little app and control those jets and make it dance, make it play with, do something with music, change the lights underneath it, and go spray up and down. And we created this little mobile interactive thing. And my team did this outside of work, outside of hours, because it wasn't a profitable project. It was nothing they could do. I just said, hey, you guys want to do this? And they were all excited about it, and they were able to do it and then give something to the city that came just from our team specifically, which is kind of neat. Then every time their friends go visit the park, they say, hey, we built that, It was kind of a cool thing to show off. The next thing we did is we decided to do volunteer work together as a team. So I was trying to build teamwork, and I had all this turnover. I didn't know what to do. So someone suggested, why don't you volunteer as a team? So I made it required, which I didn't tell HR or my boss I was doing this. I probably should have in hindsight. But I made it required for us to spend lunch once a quarter to go and serve at a soup kitchen, or volunteer at a retirement home to play games with old people, or to go and sort food and donations at one of the donation centers. We went to a detention home for children, and we pressure washed their toys. And we started doing these things, and I didn't see any results, really. I didn't really notice any difference. And then after about a third one of the people on the team says, hey, I booked something for us to do at this other place. I said, you booked it? And like, yeah, put this on your calendar. This is when we're going to do our lunch thing. I was like, well, that's just next month. That's not the next course. Like, it's okay. We want to do it. So then they started doing it, and they started doing it monthly, and they started doing it themselves, which was awesome. And then I realized that they had found something else that they could do together and do purpose, and and feel like they're actually contributing to society, to the community around them. And during the period where we were doing this for 3 years, we didn't lose a single developer. So we went from the highest turnover rate in the company to 3 years not losing a single developer. And then when we did lose somebody, it was an internal promotion to another team. So it really wasn't a loss, in my opinion. We also did, the top one is us at a habitat build, and there's a couple more people that didn't make the picture. But they decided, without telling me, that they were going to take a week off work together using PTO and do a habitat build as a team. And then they told me afterwards, like, hey, we're taking a week off. We all put in PTO together. Will you approve it? And by the way, you have to put in PTO too to come with us. Like, oh, I do. So it's kind of neat when your team is leading you to do service projects that are outside of work, costing them their leave and their time to do things together because they wanted to build that community and that teamwork. So we did that, and that was an awesome experience, and it's something that, I wish I definitely want to do that again sometime because it was awesome. So that's how you work on the interior, is you find things that will motivate you and move your team forward in one way or another. And anybody can do this. And the cool thing is I didn't tell my boss we were doing this when we started, but I told him later, and nobody's going to be the boss that says, no, you can't go volunteer, you got to cancel that. You don't want to be that jerk that prevents you from serving at a soup kitchen, right? So once you get the train going, it's hard to stop it. So get the train going. Just start doing stuff. All right, next up is refinements. Refinements is those extra touches that you're going to put in there. They aren't necessarily required, but they're going to boost your morale. They're going to boost things forward. And the one thing that I really want to talk about this is the idea of taking a field trip. Take field trips. If anybody here writes code, go see people using your code. Go watch them. When I took a field trip with those truck drivers and I saw how they were actually closing the tickets, it made a difference. Well, we also wrote a ticketing system for our call center, and going and sitting with them and listening to the calls and seeing how they actually operate it changed how we did that. Just taking that field trip changed the processes and the motivations. We got the requirements, but those didn't make sense anymore because now we were actually there and we got to experience it. The one story I want to tell is Doug Dietz. Anybody know who Doug Dietz is? Anybody heard of Doug? Probably not. Doug makes MRI machines. Now, how many people have ever had an MRI? Those are fun. Yeah, right? You sit down in this little thing, they roll you through like a big donut, and you hear all this noise. It's kind of scary. Well, Doug wanted to take a field trip to look at how his new MRI machine was going. He thought, well, I'm going to go there, and I'm going to check out what the doctors are doing and how the response is, how the doctors like it. And so he went to this pediatric hospital and was horrified to find out that 70% of the children had to be sedated to go into his machine because they were terrified by it. So he didn't see what he wanted to see, but he learned something, and with just a few small changes, he was able to add some paint, add some sounds, put some music in there, and change the interaction that he had with the kids. And now, when these new machines were rolled out, only 10% of the patients had to be sedated in order to go through them. So it made a huge impact with just a small change. No doctor was giving him the requirements of painting these things and making them look nice. They were just telling him what they needed to see. But he saw what the kids needed to see. So definitely take a field trip if you can. All right. And the last thing is exterior. So once you get all those things done, you've done your refinements, honestly, the exterior is going to just build itself. It really will. People will see your team differently. They'll see you differently, and they'll respond differently. But there's still some things you can do. You can celebrate your team. And I don't mean celebrate work anniversaries. Honestly, it doesn't matter that you didn't quit for 3 years. So what? Celebrate the fact that you achieved your project on time with no code, with no bugs, or that you were able to come in ahead of schedule on certain projects, or that you're not the bottleneck anymore. Now it's your QA or some other department. Celebrate those things. So some of the things you can do is always give credit to individuals when you're outside of your group. Whenever you're presenting something and one of the other vice presidents or directors comes to you and tells you that your team did a great job on this, say, no, Lloyd did a great job on this, or Domingo did a great job on this, and point out what they did and ask that manager or director to send an email to that individual, because that means so much more than coming from you. When someone from the outside that they don't really have much interaction with thanks them for something that they actually had a hand in, it means so much more than me going up to them and saying, hey, Billy Bob thought you did a good job on this project, right? So ask people to celebrate your team for you. Never blame an individual. If something goes wrong, it's never an individual's fault to the outside. It's your fault because you're the leader. You take responsibility. You take ownership. You could have told them a little bit more about how important this was. You could have checked behind them a little bit more. There's always more you could have done, so you take responsibility. And then annual reports. Annual reports is something I started doing, even though it wasn't required, a few years ago, and I still do them. But basically, it's just putting a report together at the end of the year of your accomplishments as a team. So and it can be fun things. I put in there how many K-cups I drank, because I drink coffee pretty much all day long. How many K-cups I drank for the year, and how many days of PTO we took to different trips, and how many conference days, how many, somebody got a certification, we put that in there, or how many days without an incident, how many days without a security breach, or things like that. And it's just cool stats to see, and people can compare them to the previous year and see improvements or see new things that were happening. One of the things we put in there is how many days without turnover. So if we had 2 years without turnover or 3 years without turnover, it's a cool thing to see to encourage people to have those little annual reports. And another result that I just want to share, and this, when I started doing this stuff, technology had 0 people win the Employee of the Month for the last 5 years. 7 people from my team have won it in the last 3. So the changes are evident. And by the way, none of those were nominated by anybody in tech. They were all nominated from outside departments and outside groups. So the results are evident whenever you go through the process and actually put the time in to build these teams and move things forward. Now that you know the FIRE principle and you know the things that are there, what's holding you back? What's holding us back? Well, the number one thing that holds people back from leadership is fear. For me, it was fear that if I make these changes, who's going to listen to me? Who am I to say these things? Are they really going to work? Am I going to just waste the company's money and time by taking people to do volunteer work? Am I going to mess something up? Are we going to be late on projects because I took people off of it to tell them to go work on something different for 4 hours? What's going to happen? And there was all this fear about it. But you have to overcome that fear. And sometimes the fear, it comes in the form of the imposter syndrome. You guys know what that is? Probably heard that before. But the imposter syndrome is where you feel like, you're an imposter. And I felt like that, honestly, before I gave this talk. I sat through some awesome sessions with some great speakers, and the whole time I kept thinking, yeah, I'm going to bomb when I get up there because these guys are so much better than me. They're awesome, and I'm not. Somebody's going to come in. I'm going to see Brian walk through the door and just say, nah, you're done. Everybody out. I have that feeling that's going to happen. And it might. But the way I get through the imposter syndrome, the way I get through the fear that I had, and I'm going to tell one more story, and that was when I was I teach part-time at Winthrop University and York Technical College, and the first time I taught, one of the people that was in my master's class with me was the associate dean, and she's like, hey, we have an opening for Computer Science 101. I know you got your software development master's. You can come in and teach that, no problem. I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. I'll do it. I'll help you out. And then the day before I went in there, I started freaking out. I started panicking and started saying, you know what's going to happen? I'm going to go up there. My fly's going to be down, for starters. They're going to make fun of me right there. Someone's going to ask me a question. I'm not going to know the answer. And then I'm going to say something that's incorrect. There's going to be a reporter for the paper in there, and they're going to write an article. And then that article's going to go viral. My boss is going to read it. My boss is going to say, oh, you obviously don't know what you're doing because you couldn't teach Computer Science 101. I'm going to get fired, and it's going to be a nightmare, right? So I went through that fear, and then I thought, well, what's the odds of that actually happening? Okay, if I think practically, not very, very high that there's going to be a reporter in a Computer Science 101 class. Not very likely that an article out of Rock Hill, South Carolina is going to go viral about a bad professor. I can always check to see if my fly is down. That's not a hard one. So what can I do to mitigate this stuff? And then when I got in there, it was all fine. It was all fine. But I did come up with some things that I was going to say if someone did ask me something I didn't know. And I rehearsed it, and I said, I'm going to say, I don't know, I will check and get back to you. And it worked. It was simple. But yeah, we all have this imposter syndrome. We all feel like, I still fear someday that our HR vice president is going to walk in with a clipboard and just say, hey, we're done. Get out of here. And they're going to find me out. But that's what life's all about. Everybody has that. You just got to get over it. You got to find a way to deal with your fears by playing it out, figuring out what the most likely scenario is going to be, and working through it that way. Now, leadership's a journey. It's a process. It's a complicated process, and it's not a project. It's not going to end. It's going to be always going on. So I want to say one more thing. And you guys know what this is? A dog? No, it's a Picasso. Picasso, and I don't know if this story is true, but I tell it all the time, so I hope it is. But Picasso was famous during his own time. So he wasn't one of those painters that didn't get famous till after he died, and then they found his work. He was, people knew who he was when he was alive, and he was somewhat of a big deal. And he would go to the bar, and a lot of times, and he would, like to drink, and then he would just doodle on a napkin and give it to somebody and say, hey, that's my tab, and just kind of move on. Well, one day, this is how the story goes. I assume it's true. He was getting ready to leave the bar, and one of his fans came up to him and was like, Picasso, I'm a huge fan. Can you draw something for me? And handed him a little piece of paper. And he did something like this. It probably took, 5 seconds, 10 seconds? Real nothing, just he drew something like that, and he went to hand it to her and said, no. That'll be $5,000. And she's like, Picasso, that took you 5 seconds. And he said, no, ma'am, that took me 30 years to learn how to do that in 5 seconds. And that's what leadership's all about. So some of the things that people do that seem simple and seem common sense take time to develop. They take experience, and they take time. So don't get discouraged if you struggle and you fail out of the gate, because that's part of the process. Leadership is a process. It's not a project. It's never going to end. The goal is a mirage. It's going to continue to move forward as you go through. So understand that the things that may seem simple to some people and difficult to others, they may have been difficult too at one point, and they just work through it. For me, speaking is terrifying still to this day. I enjoy doing it, and it's something you have to work at. And also, leading is the same way. Every time I come up with something new I want to share with my team and do it, I am so nervous of how they're going to react. And if they're going to respond to it, if they're going to like it, if they're going to hate it. But you have to sit through it and work through those perspectives. Same thing when I'm doing like a one-on-one with someone. It's not that, every one-on-one I do with someone, I hate it. I'm so nervous. I'm so introverted. I feel awkward having those conversations, you know. But I sit there for about 15 minutes beforehand, and I go through what has this person's day been like so far, and I think about who they are. So if I'm picking one of my former employees, Domingo, and I say, what is Domingo's day like? Well, I know he had a 25-minute commute. I know he has 2 kids that he had to take to daycare on his way in. I wonder if they were bad in the car. I wonder if they were crying like my kids do sometimes in the car. And I put him in a bad mood when he got here. I got to cater to that. So I think through all the scenarios and try to get in his head before we have this one-on-one so that when I'm in there, it comes out a little bit easier. You know, you put forth the work, you put forth the effort, and you figure it out. It's never a project that's going to be over. Every time you have to go through this process. And it gets easier as you go. And eventually it looks like it's simple, but it's not. It takes time. All right? And that's all I got. I hope you guys have some questions for me. And hit me up on LinkedIn for sure and Twitter because I'll respond to you. And that's my email address. You can always email me. But yeah.